Okay, good evening, class, and welcome to our MI class for this evening. I do hope that everyone present in class is hearing me. So I want to confirm if you can hear me loud and clear, if you can see my slides, and if you can see my calculator. These three things. You can see me, see my notes, and see my calculator. I want you to go to the message, to the chat box, and type what you can see. You can see me, you can see my notes, you can see my calculator. This will signal, and if you can hear me clearly, this will signal the start of the lectures today. So do that please for the next 1 minute so that we can start. Hello, I want to get a response. If I don't get a response, it means you can't hear me. If you can hear me, if you can see me, you can see my slide, and you can see my calculator, please go to the chat room and type what you can see, not giving me an emoticon. Type what you can see. That's the instruction so that we can start. That shows that you can actually hear me. Okay, you can see here. Can you see my notes? Can you see my calculator? It's important that you tell me that one. I will just assume that you can see my calculator because your comment is not showing if you can see my calculator. So it's an assumed knowledge that you can see my calculator also. Even though you say you can see my lecture notes, I am assuming you can see my calculator. Okay, so the topic in front of us today is limiting factor decisions. Okay, so let's go over the class rules first of all before we talk about the topic for today. Limiting factor decision is the topic for today, but the class rule says that you should mute your audio and not put on your video. That's like a rule number one, so that we can have a nice class today. Ask questions professionally using the chat box. Once you ask your questions, I will see them immediately. Then you are asked to pay attention to the class rather than writing, because the notes and the solution are also with you there. Okay, so now let's start right away to the topic in front of us. Limiting factor decisions. Okay, now what is a limiting factor? Which factors are we talking about? Now, when we talk about factors, we are looking at factors of production. Okay, so we are talking about production in the real sense of the word. We have some factors of production, which could be land, material, it could also be production, it could also be machines, men. All these are factors of production. Now, these factors could affect production in such a way that we could not meet our demand. So in this lecture, we are going to see what kind of decision are we going to take when we have these factors of production affecting us in such a way that our sales demand is not met. Now, look at it now. We are going to be looking at just a single factor affecting production at a time. Okay, so we are going to be looking at only one factor of production affecting production in just a time. So if we are to have more than one factors of production affecting us at a given time simultaneously, then we cannot use this method that we are talking about. So the thing you should know in this particular topic is, one, there is something limiting your production. So you cannot produce as much as you can. Secondly, that thing that is limiting your production is just one thing limiting your production. And thirdly, since we are talking about our sales demand as our principal budget factor, we will not use sales demand as our factor of production. We will not use sales demand as our factors of production, or will not use that sales demand as a limiting factor. Okay, so these are the things that we want to talk about that are limiting our production. All right, so one of the functions of management is to make decisions on how to run a business. And so the decisions involve making a choice as to what kind of goods to be produced and what are the different possible options. Now, in this our discussion today, we are going to see how we can make decisions. Now, if you're going to make a decision, it means you will be having more than one choice, because you don't make a decision when there is only one option. If it is only one choice, it means you have to accept that option. But when you have more than one, it means you are going to make a choice. Okay? To help us make quality decisions, management will rely on relevant information. So it is assumed that in budgeting, a company can produce as many units of its product or services as is necessary to meet available sales demand. Therefore, sales demand is normally the factor that sets a limit on the volume of production and sales in each period. We call that the principal budget factor. Sometimes, however, there could be a shortage of a key resource, production resource, such as an item of direct material or skilled labor or machine capacity. In these circumstances, the factor setting a limit to the volume of sales and profit in a particular volume is the availability of the scarce resources, because sales are restricted by the amount that the company can produce. If the company makes just one product and production resource is a limited supply, Profit is maximized by making as many units of the product as possible with the limited resources available. What does it mean? Let's assume that I am making bread, typical illustration, and that is the only thing I make, bread. So if flour, which is the principal material that is used to make bread, is a limited supply, and so it means that instead of 500 bags that I usually ask for in a month, I get only 300 or perhaps 250. Now, how will I make maximum profit? It means that when I get the 250 bags, I will make as many bread as I can using that 250 bags. It means you have only one product. All you need to do is use this one product, make this one product with these available resources. No decision is involved here. However, when a company makes and sell more than one product with the same scarce resources, for example, I do cake and I do bread and we are using flour, then it means that we now need to decide how many bread I'm going to make and how many flour I'm going to make using that 250 bags of flour available to me. So it's not going to be as a business as usual, that you have a set amount of bread you make or set amount of cake you make. You now have to now sit down and say, oh, how will I maximize my profit? Which one should I make first? Which one should I make next? Now, how do you identify the limiting factor? Because we say that the limiting factor is what restricts sales. And so if you want to maximize your sales, you need to identify the limiting factor so that you can work with your limiting factor. A question might tell you that there is a restricted supply of a resource without telling you which of this resource is in limited supply. So it means that, let's say, there is a limited supply of material, and perhaps there could be a limited supply of labor. But the question did not tell you which one of them could be limited in supply. You are just only giving the factors of production: machine, men, and materials. And you are told the quantity that is needed and the quantity available. But you are not told which one of them is the principal budget factor or the scarce resource. How do you go about buying the scarce resource? Because the best thing to do is to identify the scarce resource so that every other thing in with this scarce resource. So if the question does not tell you which of the resource is in limited supply, you have to find that. So how do you do it? How do you find that? By calculating the budgeted activity for each resource that you are given and the amount of resource that is needed to meet your available sales demand. What do we mean? We mean that if you are told that you have material available to make bread, you now need to find out how many loaves of bread is being demanded of you. That is the budgeted activity. How many loaves of bread is being demanded from you? Now, how many material is enough to make this quantity of bread? Let's say if you are demanded to make 2,000 loaves of, and you need 2,200 bags to make these 2,000 loaves of bread. That means you have stated your budgeted level of activity, 200 bags. Then you now check how many bags do you have. If you now check and you see that you have 250 bags, it means that your available resources can meet the budgeted your budgeted demand. So what do you say? Once you have enough to meet your budget, you will never go deficit. It means that you have surplus or enough. Then it means that is not the limiting factor. Then you need to check the next factor of production. So let's say you've checked material. Material is not the problem. You now check labor. You now see that you need about, let's say, 500 hours to make these 2,000 loaves of bread. You need 500 hours. You now check your labor capacity and you find out that you have 400 hours available. Mind you, you have 500 hours required of you. 400 is available. It means you have a shortage of labor of 100. Now, when there is a shortage or deficit of available resource, it means you have a limiting factor, and that is the limiting factor we are talking about. It means you have identified the limiting factor. Okay, so let's see a question on identifying a limiting factor. Okay, so on the board here, we have a question that leads to identifying a limiting factor. A company manufactures and sells two products. So in your exam, when you are given a limiting factor problem, it means that one, you must have more than one product being produced by the company. That's why you need to take decision. More than one product. So you could be having just two products. It could be three products, it could be four. So in your exam, you'll be prepared to get two or three or four. Secondly, all the products involved will share the same resource. If they share the same resource, then that's interesting because that resource could be the scarce resource. So if that resource is scarce, that means you now think of how to ration that resource to fit in all the products. But if all these products that you are making do not share the same resource and it is scarce, there is no need for decision because the product that is affected is what is going to be reduced. But if there are two or three products being affected by that same resource, that is what limiting factor is seeking to answer. So look at this question again. A company manufactures and sells two products, product X and product Y, which are both manufactured using two different machines. Now we can identify two products for the company, and we can identify two factors, which are machines. Yes, one factor is machine, but there are two different machines. The time taken to make each product together with the maximum machine time available and contribution per unit and demand are as follows. Now, if you look at the heading here, we have product X and Y, and hours available. Okay. Now, in machine type 1, which is the first factor, it means that machine type 1 can produce product X, 1 unit, in 10 minutes. So what does it mean? And I'll bring my calculator now. If 1 unit is produced in 10 minutes, then how many products can we make in an hour? So 60 minutes is 1 hour. And if one product is being done in 10 minutes, it means that you have to divide 60 by 10. So what's happening to this calculator? Oh, this is a disaster. So divide 60 by 10 gives you 6 products in 1 hour. So it means that it's either you say 1 unit in 10 minutes or 6 units in 1 hour. So it is usual to convert it to per hour. Okay, so it means that you can make 6 products of X in 1 hour. Using the same reasoning, if you can make 1 unit in machine type A of Y in 6 minutes, how many can you make in an hour? We have 60 minutes make up an hour, and you divide it by 6 products in a minute, it means you are going to make 10 in an hour. And you are told that the hours available for machine type 1, the maximum hours available is 3,000 hours. It means that whatever combination you are doing, if you are making X 6 units in 1 hour and Y 10 units in 1 hour, for the whole hours available is 3 hours. You now have to check your combination. We go to machine type 2. You are making 5 minutes of X in 1 unit. Use 1 unit, you use 5 minutes to make 1 unit. Or in 1 hour, you make 12 units. Then for Y, you make 5 units in 1 hour. And you can spend a maximum of 4,200 hours in machine type 2. Then you were told that your sales demand in units, it means that for X, they have demanded that you produce 12,000 units. So that is what your customers have demanded. For Y, they have demanded that you produce 15,000 units. Now you are going to use all these available hours required. Now, what machine is the limiting factor? So I said before, we need to know the limiting factor because that is the key to knowing how to produce. When there is a scarce resources, we do everything that the scarce resources asks us to do. It means that scarce resource is our central focus. If we don't have a scarce resource, it means we can meet the 12,000 demand of product X and 15,000 demand in product Y if there is no scarce resource. But when there is a scarce resource, it means we cannot meet it. So we will now look at the scarce resource and see how we can scale our production to meet the scarce resource. But for you to do that, we need to identify the scarce resource. How do we identify the scarce resource? Now look at the solution here. We take them machine type 1 and machine type 2. First of all, we need to know how many hours of machine hours is required of us, and how many hours, machine hours, is available to us. Okay, so if you look at it here, we said 3,000 hours is available to us here in machine type 1. But how many is required? Let's see. We were told that we need 12,000 units of product X. So I'll go here. 12,000 units of product X is what our demand is. Okay. Now, wow, this has hung my mouse. 12,000 units is being demanded. Okay. Now, we are told that that's the overall. How many can we make in an hour? The question says here, we can make 6. The question says we can make 6 in an hour. So it means that if we make 6 in 1 hour and we have 12,000 units to make, taking them 6 per hour, 6 per hour, how many hours are we going to use to make these 12,000 units? Simply put, you have 12,000 units divided by 6 units per hour gives you 2,000 hours. So it means that if you are taking 6 units per hour, 6 units per hour, in 2,000 hours, you may have done the whole 12,000 units. Now that's for product X. For product Y, we were told that we are demanding 15,000 units, and we are doing 10 units in 1 hour. So if we calculate again, 15,000 units divided by 10 units per hour gives you 1,500 hours. So what do? You add the 2,000 hours required for product X plus the 1,500 required for product Y, all of them passing through machine type 1, it will give you 3,500. So it means that how many hours is required to meet up production of 12,000 units and 15,000 units of X and Y respectively is 3,500 hours. Now from the question, 3,000 hours is available. 3,000 hours is available. So what do? If 3,000 hours is available and you were told that you require 3,500 hours, it means that you have a shortage of 500 hours. Shortage of hours. You need to go and source for option. Okay, so it's just like saying that you went to the market, 3,000 naira in your hand. That is what you went naira. Only for you I'm so sorry for the interruption in the class. Somebody was calling my number while the class was on. It affected the network. Okay, so now it means like if you look at it in another way, we took 3,000 naira available with you. I'm just saying that it's like naira, although this is in hours. Let's just use it in practical terms. You need, okay, let's even use hours. It means that you have 3,000 hours available to work. But the demand is demanding you to use 3,500 hours. So you ask yourself, where will I get this extra 500 hours from? You can't get the 500 hours. So all you need to do is make do with the 3,000 hours you have. That means something must suffer. Could it be product X or product Y? But the thing is, as long as you have a shortage of hours, you have identified the limiting factor. But let's continue and see if we will still have a shortage in machine 2. Let's look at machine 2. The same scenario is playing out here. We need 12,000 units of product X, but in machine 2, we can produce 12 units in 1 hour. So simply put, 12,000 units overall divided by 12 units means 1,000 hours is required for product X in machine 2. Now going to machine Y, we have 15,000 units, and we're taking them 5 units in 1 hour. When you divide 15,000 by 5, you have 3,000 hours available for unit Y or product Y. So when you now add your 1,000 hours for X plus your 3,000 hours for Y, you are getting a total requirement of 4,000 hours for the production. It means that the production demands 4,000 hours. Okay, so how many hours do you have available? The question says you have 4,200 hours. So you check here now, you have 4,200. So it means that out of the 4,200 hours you have available, you are only using 4,000. That means you have a surplus hours of 200. And I said, when you have a surplus, it means that factor is not the limiting factor. So you can say clearly that machine 1 is the limiting factor. Okay, so when there is a shortage of resource, it means that is the limiting factor. Now let's assume that machine 1 and machine 2 have shortage. Both of them cannot be the limiting factor. You will have to look at which one of them has the highest shortage. That one will now become the limiting factor. So let's assume that the machine 2 has 100 hours shortage. You cannot compare 100 hours with 500 hours of machine 1. And so, or let's say even this 200 hours that was surplus here, let's assume it was shortage. You cannot compare 200 hours with 500 hours. So when there are two shortages in the two factors, the one that has the highest shortage becomes the limiting factor. Okay? But if both of them have surplus, we do not consider highest surplus or lowest surplus. As long as there is surplus, then there is no limiting factor. And that is not what is being covered here. Okay, so we've seen how we can identify a limiting factor. All right. Now, look at the steps you need to take when you are maximizing your profits when there is a limiting factor. And I said before, there is just going to be one single limiting factor. Now, when there is just one limiting factor, which could be other than sales demand, because your sales demand will not be in contest here, your sales demand will not be a limiting factor. Your total profit will be maximized in the period by maximizing the total contribution you earn with the available scarce resource. Now, this is the approach you will need to adopt when you are calculating or when you are looking for your maximum profits when there is a limiting factor. Step number one, you need to identify your contribution per unit of each of the types of goods that you are producing. Now, in this case here, you have product X and you have product Y. You need to identify how much per unit is X contributing, how much per unit is Y contributing. That's one. Secondly, you need to identify your scarce resource. Now, it means that your factors of production, which one of them is giving you a shortage? We've seen in example one how we can identify a scarce resource. There are two ways. One, the question will tell us that machine one is the scarce resource, or machine two is the scarce resource, or material X, or material Y, or material Z is the scarce resource. Now, if they tell you that, it means they have made life easy for you. But as the case as we saw in example one, they may not tell you your scarce resource. So now that means you should identify that scarce resource. So step one, know your contribution per unit. Step two, identify your scarce resource. Step three, you need to calculate the amount of scarce resource that are used by each type of goods and of goods produced. So, like we did in example one, not only did we identify the scarce resource, we identified how much of that scarce resource are we required to make, are we required for the production. So that means you are going to calculate the amount of scarce resource used by each type of goods produced or that is required of you. Step number four, you need to divide your contribution per unit that you got in step one with the scarce amount of scarce resource that you've gotten in step three. So step number four, you are just using contribution per unit in step one, and step three, amount of scarce resource per unit. So you see, step one is contribution per unit for X, contribution per unit for Y. Step three is how many units am I required to use to make 1 unit of X? How many units am I required per unit to make 1 product of Y? So it is step one divided by step three. That is what gives you your step four. And what do we call step four? We call it contribution per unit per scarce resource. Now we go to step 5. Step 5 is we now rank our goods in order of contribution per unit of the scarce resource. So the result we get in step 4, we will now rank them up. What do we mean by ranking? It means we have to assign position. Which one is first? Which one is second? Which one is third? How do we know which one is first? Anyone that has a higher contribution per scarce resource is ranked first. Anyone that has the lowest contribution per scarce resource is ranked last. And then the final step is to construct a production plan. Construct a production plan that is based on the ranking. Now, what do we mean by constructing a production plan? Now, this is where the limiting factor is being applied. The reason for ranking of your goods is something that is called scale of preference. So when we say a scale of preference, you are ranking your goods in terms of priority. So the one ranked first is the one that will give you your highest profit if you concentrate on that. The one ranked second is the second highest, like that. So when you are constructing your production plan based on this ranking, it means that when you pick the product ranked first or the product ranked 1, you will stay with that product and satisfy it to its logical conclusion as per the demand required from the customer. If the available hours or so, if that's the scarce resource, if the available hours can meet up producing all of maybe product A or product B or product C, whichever is ranked first, if all the hours available can meet its production, by all means, give it to it. Then after finishing the one ranked first, check again. Do I still have scarce resources available? If you have none, then it means you have to stop there. But if you have some, after satisfying the one ranked first, you move to the one ranked second and stay with it. So it's just like saying you do your A task first, then you go to the B task, the one ranked second, and stay with it. So you try to produce according to the remaining resource to see if it can meet up the B part, the second one ranked, the one ranked 2. Let's assume you have 3 products. You might be surprised that there will be not enough maybe labor hours to finish the whole requirements of the second one. So that means you will limit what is being done on the second. So let's say you were required to do 12,000 units and the remaining time can only make you to do 10,000 units. You produce the 10,000 units and you have the limited factor that enable you to do only 10,000 units. You could not do the remaining 2,000 units. They have delimited you. Then if you have another product ranked third, it means that you can no longer produce the product ranked third because all your available hours have been used to channel into producing the one ranked first and part of the one ranked second. So that is what we mean by constructing your production plan based on ranking. Okay, so we are going to look at a question now to see how this can be done. Okay, now this question number 2 is the same question that we have in question number 1. Okay, but there is only one thing that is different. Now everything is the same except this line. you have been given that your contribution per unit is 7 naira for X and 5 naira for Y. So this is the thing that is the addition to the question. So everything looks the same. This is the addition. And look at the required. They have told you something in the required. Given that machine 1 is the limiting factor. So they've told you. So can you remember the steps we said before we have to apply? The first one is to get your contribution per unit, which we have gotten here. The question gave it to us. This examiner is so happy he gave it to you. But sometimes you may not be giving your contribution per unit. So what do? You look for it. How do you get contribution per unit in case it was not given to you? Selling price minus your variable cost gives you contribution per unit. Another way, if you have profit per unit and you have fixed cost per unit, you can say your profit per unit plus your fixed cost per unit will give you contribution per unit. So these are two ways you can get your contribution per unit, depending on how the question is framed. Now you've gotten your contribution per unit. Step 2, identify your limiting factor. The question has given it to us. Yes, we knew it because that was what we did in example 1, and we got machine 1 as our limiting factor. Now they are asking you, what is the optimal production plan? That means they're asking you step 6 question. They're asking you for you to do step 6. So you cannot jump step. You have identified step 1 and 2. That means you will need to still follow the process to step 3, step 4, step 5, then you get your step 6. So what is the production plan that maximizes annual contribution and profits that the company should adopt? Okay, so step 1, you can see here, contribution. Step 2, limiting factor has been identified. Step 3, we said we need to look for the limiting factor per unit. What is the limiting factor per unit here? It is either we say 5, 12, either we say 12 units per hour, or we say 5 units per minute, 5 minutes per unit. Whichever one we use, we are talking about the limiting factor per unit. So we may need to either convert minutes to hours and say 12 minutes per hour, 5 minutes, 12 hours per 12 units per hour, 5 minutes per hour, or we take them per unit, 5 minutes per unit, 12 minutes per unit. So it says we keep them in minutes, whichever one fits you. Then you now divide by contribution to get your contribution per limiting factor. So let's see how the question is being solved here. Okay, so look at it here. We have identified our contribution per unit in X. Let me use X first to do it. Then your limiting factor we said is 10 minutes per unit. Okay, because we said limiting factor per unit. So we need to take the one that is per unit. This one is per unit. So we need to take it in per unit. So we have adopted the 10. Okay, sorry. This is not the limiting factor here. Question. This is not the limiting factor. We identify that machine 1 is limiting factor here. So we take this 10 minutes and this 6 minutes because they are in per unit. So your answer would be in per unit. You can decide to use hours and take these 6 units per hour, but let's just follow what they said here. So for X, we've taken 10 minutes per unit. So what do? 7 divided by 10. What do you have? We have 7 naira divided by 10 minutes. It means you have 0.7 naira per minute. It means that your contribution per limiting factor is 0.70 naira per minute. If you want to convert it in hours, you just have to multiply by 60. If you say 0.7, you multiply by 60, you are going to get 6 naira per, you're going to get 6 naira per minute. So if you are using, so you are using 6 units per hour. So it means that you are getting 6 naira per minute. So what it means is that 6 units in 1 hour. So you have converted it from minutes to hour. So from 10 minutes, converted it to an hour. So that's how you convert from hours to minutes. But let's leave it here as 0.7 per minute. It doesn't matter. We're not using it to do anything. So this contribution per limiting factor. This contribution per limiting factor is not useful to us except for the purpose of ranking its work. Let's go to Y. We have 5 naira as the contribution per unit, and we are told that we are using units. When you divide 5 by 5 naira divided by 6, all you have is 0.83 naira per minute. So what you now do is getting your contribution per unit, you now rank between 0.7 and 0.83. Which one is giving you a higher figure? 0.83 is giving you a higher figure. So you take this as your first priority. It means you have to stay with product Y and finish its demand before you move to product X. So look at how you do it. Look at the rank. Rank them first, second. Look at the product you rank as first is product Y. Product Y is ranked first. Now, how many units of Y is demanded from you? Look at it. You are demanded 15,000 units. So it means that you have 15,000 units of your sales units that is demanded from you. How many machine hours can you use to produce Y? How many machine hours can you use? So it means that if you are using 6 minutes in 1 hour, you are using 6 minutes in 1 hour, or you are using 10 units. Sorry, if you use 6 minutes to make 1 unit, or you are using 10 units to make 1 hour. Now we are converting it to hours because we said machine hours used. So we have to use the hour conversion. It means that You have 15,000 units of Y to make, and you are making them 10 units in 1 hour. So divide by 10, it means you need a total of 1,500 hours in order to satisfy your 15,000 units. So that's what it means here. We have 1,500 hours used in making 15,000 units. Okay? So what is the contribution per unit that Y is giving to us? From the question, it is 5 naira. Okay? So when you multiply 5 naira per unit by your 15,000 units, so let's check 15,000 units multiplied by 5 naira gives you 75,000 naira as your contribution. As your contribution. Okay? Now that we've done product Y first, and our total factor, our total hours available for products for machine type 1 is 3,000 hours. Oh, 3,000 hours is what is available. And what have we used in making product Y? We've just used 1,500. So we have 3,000 to be maximized. We want to use everything. So it means that if you have only 2 products, it means product X can only use 1,500. So notice here that in product Y, you are moving from left to right. But once you have only 2 products and you've taken one, product X, you have to move from right to left and not left to right. Let's try left to right, whether we run into problem. Okay, from left to right, we demand 12,000 units. Okay, so let's look at it now. 12,000 units is what we are asked to produce for X. And if we are producing 6 units in 1 hour, so you divide by 6 units in 1 hour, how many hours do we need? We need 2,000 hours to produce everything. And of course, this is limiting factor, we can't produce everything. Can you see that we have only 1,500 available? That means there will be a shortage of 500 hours, which we saw when we did question 1. 500 hours will be short. So we cannot do everything for product X. We need to limit it. So let's limit it to the remaining of the 1,500 and not the whole 2,000. So what do? If we have 1,500 hours available to us, we have 1,500 hours available to us, and we are doing it. If we have 1,500 hours available to us, and we are doing 6 units in 1 hour, how many products are we going to do? That means we have 1,500 hours, 1,500 hours multiplied by 6. That gives you 9,000 units that you should make. So you see that informs moving to here, you have 9,000 units. So can you see that they are doing the opposite of what you did in X, in Y? In Y, how did we get this 1,005? We said we use 15,000 divided by 10 units. So you divided to get 1,500. But when you are going the other way, you multiply to get 9,000. So you have 1,005 here. You multiply by 6 to get 9,000. So that's why you see my arrow moving like this to the right hand side, that you have to move like that for the last one that is the limiting factor. So you come back again. After making 9,000 units and your contribution per unit is 7 naira, what is your total contribution? 9,000 multiplied by 7 naira per unit gives you 63,000 naira. So 63,000 naira plus 75,000 naira gives you a total of 138,000 naira as your total contribution. So that is how we get our total contribution. So what can you say? The product that maximizes time. Look at this note here. The plan is constructed as follows. Y is ranked first. So the company needs to make as many of product Y as possible. The most it can sell is 15,000 units, which would take 1,500 hours, which I told you, making 10 units per hour. The company has 3,000 hours available so that all of these 1,500 units can be made, since we are only going to take 1,500. Now, after taking the first 1,500, the remaining 1,500 is left. That can be used to make product X. Product X is ranked second, and since we can only sell, since it has been demanded, 12,000 units have been demanded, which would take 2,000 hours using 6 per hour. It means we can no longer do the whole 12,000. It has to be limited to producing 9,000 hours. And I told you how we got the 9,000 hours by looking at it from this other angle. 1,500 units, 1,005 hours available multiplied by 6 units per hour give us the 9,000 units that we have decided to make. And you see that 138,000 is your maximum contribution. So if you are to do it any other way, you will not get maximum contribution. But to use any other way, the contribution you will be getting will not be as much as 138. So you see the purpose why we need to do this limiting factor analysis. Assuming we are to say, oh, product X is contributing 7 units, and so we have to rank X as first. We are going to get something smaller. So let's try it. Assuming you rank product X as the first, and you get 7 naira per unit. That would mean that the 12,000 units that we have here, you can produce it. So let's see. 12,000 units, which will require 2,000 hours, multiplied by 7 naira. That gives you 84,000. Now, after getting 2,000 hours, that means 1,000 hours will be left for product Y. And so if you have 15,000, okay, so we'll do it backward. We have 1,000 hours available, and you are doing 10 per hour. It means if you do 10, it means you're only going to do 10,000 units as against 15,000 units. If you now multiply 10,000 units produced with 5 naira per unit, you're going to get 50,000 naira as your contribution. Mind you, you have gotten 84,000 in the other products. So when you add 84,000 to it, what you have here is 134,000 naira as your contribution. So can you see that at 134 is smaller than 138? So I just demonstrate now to you that you cannot use contribution per unit to rank to deal with limiting factor. You have use contribution per unit to rank. The contribution you are going to get is going to be smaller. But the better way is to rank based on contribution per limiting factor. Like this question, and we have 138, and I told you any other method will give you a smaller contribution. This to be I'm sorry for the network issue. Okay, now we look at question 3. A company makes 4 products, A, B, C, and D. So you have to make a choice now. Just a moment. Okay. You are having 3 products, 4 products here. And the interesting thing is that they all use this direct labor workforce on all products. It means that they are using the same factor of production. And so if that's the case, this factor is the scarce resource. Then resource allocation, we need to employ the use of limiting factor. Okay, so we have seen that one line to help you know which one is your limiting factor is This one that they say use same using the same labor workforce. So this gives you a hint that labor hours will be the limiting factor. The company has no inventory goods. Direct labor is paid 12 naira per hour. So direct labor is 12 naira per hour. Take note of that. Okay, then so the sales demand in full will require 12,000 units, 1,000 hours of direct labor hours. So it means that they will require 12,000 hours to meet everything. So they have done it for us. That product A, the hours required in product A, plus the hours required in product B, plus hours required in product C, and for the hours required in product D, all of them combined is going to give 12,000 hours. They've done it for us. We are not told that only 6,000 direct labor hours is available. There's going to be a shortage of 6,000. That means you need to meet a lot of things. You might end up with products. You might end up not doing one product. You might end up not doing two products. You might just do only two products. We don't know which one is it. So, but out of the 12 hours that you are required to do everything, 6,000 hours is available. Now look at the budgeted data that they gave you. They gave you annual sales demand, 4,000 units, 5,000 units, and 8,000 and 4,000 units for each of A, B, C, and D. Okay, then look at direct materials, look at direct labor costs. Okay, they have told you direct labor costs, variable overhead, fixed overhead, full cost price, and sales price and profit. Now, this is a kind of absorption costing method. Okay, so we are giving direct material costs, direct labor, and variable overhead. And we have a fixed overhead. If you want to find your variable costs, you want to find, okay, this one now, you want to find your variable cost, it is easy for you. Now we are asked to look for the optimal production plan. What do you need to do? Remember your steps. First thing to do here is to identify the contribution per unit. Contribution per unit. So what do we do in contribution per unit? We are not giving contribution per unit here. How do we do it? Our contribution is going to be, right here. Contribution, we write it down there. Contribution, reduce the size. All right, so contribution per unit is going to give me sales price minus variable costs. So how do you get your variable costs? Your variable cost is gotten from identifying all those your variable cost is identified by checking your direct material. So let's do that for A. Direct material is 3 naira. direct labor is 6 naira, and variable overhead is 2 naira. So what do we do? What do we have here? 3 plus 3 plus 6 plus 2. That gives me 11. 11 naira per unit is our variable cost. Then what do we have as our sales price? Our selling price here is 15.5. So we say 15.5 minus 11 gives me 4.5 as my contribution per unit. And so I'm using example, I'm using plot A to show you an example of how to look for our contribution per unit. You were not given, and so we have to look for it. So if you look at it here, this is how we got our 4.5 here. This is our contribution per unit. This is our variable cost, and this is our selling price. When you let this from this, you have your 4.5. So that same way you do for B, C. 1 naira, we have 2.5 naira, and you have 9 naira. So this is your contribution per unit. That is identified. The next step is, what is your limiting factor? There can be no doubt that the limiting factor by implication is the direct labor hours. The question says here that to meet demand will require 12,000 hours, but only 6,000 hours is available. So you see one way of them telling you that your scarce resource or your limiting factor is direct labor. They told you the hours required and they told you hours available. So you look for yourself. Which one is you? Do you have a shortage? If it has, then that is your limiting factor. Okay, so after getting your limiting factor, we need to know our limiting factor per unit. Limiting factor per unit. So our limiting factor is labor hours. So we now need to know our labor hours per unit. Were we given? We were not given. What we are given is direct labor cost. It's cost. But what we need is hours. We need direct labor hours. That's what we need. How do we have our direct labor hours? Okay. If we are paid 12 naira for 1 hour, and for A, we spent a total of 6 naira doing A. How many hours have we spent doing A? All we need to do is 6 naira, which is spent doing A, divided by 12 naira per unit, per hours rather, to give you 0.5 hours. So your direct labor hours for A is 0.5 hours. So that's how it finds itself here. So let's see it here, how we get our direct labor hours. So we see that our limiting factor is labor hours. And we are given direct labor cost per unit, 6 naira, 12 naira, and all that. So this 6 naira is the 6 naira we paid when we did A. And we are told that the rate with which we use in paying direct labor hours is 12 naira. So 12 naira is in everything here. So you simply do 6 naira divided 12 naira per hour gives you 0.5. So it is this 0.5 that is your direct labor hours per unit. So that means you have step number 3 now. Step number 1 is identify your contribution per unit. You have it already here. It is derived here 4.5. Step number 2, look for your limiting factor. From the question, you said the labor hours. Step number 3, look for your limiting factor per unit. Not given hours per unit. We derive labor hours per unit by looking at how much is our labor cost and how much is the rate. So we say labor cost for 6 naira, the rate per hour is 12 naira per hour. So divide naira from 6 naira, you have 0.5 hours used in making second productivity, and productivity. Now you've got step 4, look for limited. So our contributing is contribution is C per, let me get contribution to give me now contribution A is 5. Let me put it naira 4.5 naira divided by 0.5 hours. So when you divide it, so you will get from 4.5 is already in the calculator, divided by 0. Surprisingly, gives you 9 naira unlimited, 9 naira per hour. So you write your 9 naira. That is we here. That is how we got. And so if you want to do other one, you have 7 naira divided by 1 gives you 7 hours. And you have 2.5 hours gives you 10 naira. And 9 naira divided by 0.75 hours. Now, after getting the limiting factor per unit, we need to rank them. So we do your ranking. Your ranking, check which of them is the highest. So that's your first, followed by this. So this your, and this your, this is the, so you'll be looking at which is the highest, followed by which is the one that comes next, like that. Now that you've done your ranking, the next thing to do is to go to your production schedule. Your production schedule will look like this. Your rank number 1 is D. You are arranging your products in preference order of ranking. So first is D. It means you are going to finish D before you move to the next one. And what is the next one you're going to move after D? You're going to move to C, which is ranked second. After finishing C, if you have anything left, you're going to move to A. And if A, after finishing A, you still have something left, we are going to move to B, the last. Okay, so that's how we want to, that's our production plan, our production schedule. Okay, so now we take D, which is the first. What is the sales unit required for D? If you look at D, we are told to do 4,000 units. So that's the 4,000 units here. That's the 4,000 units that we are asked to do. So bring it here. Our sales unit is 4,000. How many labor hours will take us to do 4,000 units? Of course, in D, our labor hours is 0.575. So what do? We will say 4,000 units multiplied by 0.75. That will give us 3,000 hours. So that brings us to this 3,000 we have here. It means that if we take 0.575 hours per unit and we work on 4,000 units, we are going to spend 3,000 hours. So we've done that. What is going to be the contribution per unit? We've identified it as step 1. Contribution per unit for D, see it here, is 9 naira. So we have worked it out. So we bring our 9 naira here and use it to multiply 4,000 units to get your contribution. So let's do it together. 4,000 units to be sold at a contribution of 9 naira. 9 naira per unit, 36,000. That's how we got our 36,000 here. Now we've done with D. The next thing to move to check is, do we have enough materials, labor hours? Do we have enough materials and enough labor hours? Yes. Out of the 6,000 hours that is available, we can use 3,000 to make D. So what happened next? It means 3,000 is remaining. So we move to the second highest, which is C. So what do? We bring the sales demand for C, 8,000 units. So what do? We bring our 8,000 units. So 8,000 units, how many hours do we take to do 1 unit? The question says here, C use 0.25 hours to do 1 unit. So you multiply by 0.25. When you multiply by 0.25, you have 2,000 hours. So that informs your 8,000 units giving you 2,000 hours. So can you see my arrow pointing from left to right? Left to right. So you're moving from the left to the right. 2,000 hours is going to be used. You check. You've taken 3,000 hours before. It now remains 3,000. And now you have 2,000 now in front of you to spend. Is it enough? Yes. So you can go ahead and spend the whole 2,000. How many will remain? You will still have something left. So it means that this is valid. You can make your whole 8,000 units using the 2,000 hours available for it. Then what is the contribution per unit? Contribution per unit, we are told, is 2.5 naira per unit. So when you multiply 2.5 multiplied by 8,000 units gives you 20,000 naira. And that's what we have here. Our 20,000 naira is the contribution. Okay, so we've done product D, spending 3,000 hours. That's the major thing because we'll be looking at the hours, which is the principal budget factor, the limiting factor is the hours. Forget about the contribution, it's not as important as the labor hours because this is our limiting factor. So that is why we are concentrating. We don't want to use more than 6,000 hours. So we use 3,000 hours for product. We are now adding 2,000 hours for product C. Make it 5,000 hours. If you remove it from 6, 1,000 hours is available. Since there is something left, what's the next rank? The next rank we done first, we done second. The third rank is A. So that's why I'm choosing A as the third rank. So I'm going to do A now. So I'll look at what is demanded of me from A. 4,000 units is demanded from me. So I'll come back here and I will say 4,000 units demanded from me. How many labor hours do I spend per unit? 0.5. So I'll multiply 4,000 by 0.5. It means that I'll be needing 2,000 hours. But do I have 2,000 hours available? No. I have used 3,000 plus 2,000, which is 5,000 out of 6,000. I only have 1,000 available. So I can't use 2,000 hours. So I can't satisfy everything for A. I must limit what I produce for A. I must scale it down. So how do we do it? If you notice, my arrow is going from right back to left. You now bring the remaining 1,000 hours available because you cannot use this 2,000 anymore. 1,000 hours available. You want to know how many products will 1,000 hours give you. If you have 1,000 hours available for you, I'll write it down here. 1,000 hours available for you, and you are doing each product 0.5 hours. Each product 0.5 hours. So you need to divide. You know, previously we used to say when we are moving from left to right, we'll be multiplying to get the labor hours used. But when you are moving from right to left, you will divide to get the number of units to be produced. So we have 1,000 divided by 0.5. 0.5. That gives us 2,000 units. So as against this 4,000 units that is demanded from us, as against that, we are going to be doing 2,000 units. So that's what informs this 2,000 units. So we are doing backward calculation. We have 1,000 hours remaining. It can only go for 2,000 units. So what is our contribution per unit? Contribution per unit for A is 4.5. And that is this 4.5 that we have here. So we say 2,000 multiplied here by 4.5. It gives you 9,000 naira as your contribution from A. So you look at it again. I have done D, I've spent 3,000. I've done C, I've spent 2,000 hours. I have done A, I have used the remaining 1,000. All my 6,000 hours has been satisfied. That means there is no hour for doing B. So if you cannot produce B, there's no hour left for producing B. That means you are not going to produce anything out of this 5,000. All you will need to do is you will not produce B at all. B is 0 sales units. Even though your contribution per unit is 7 naira, you are going to get 0 naira contribution. So when you add every of these total contributions, so your maximum contribution is 65,000. Any other method apart from this will give you a lower contribution. Mind you, you don't rank your products based on contribution per unit. If you were to rank it based on contribution per unit, it means you would have done D first, followed by B, then A, then C. And if you have done it that way, what you'll be getting as your contribution per unit and contribution here will be less than 65,000 naira, given this limiting factor. So you have to do it this way. You have to get your contribution per unit. You have to identify your scarce resource. Then you have to find your contribution per scarce resource. Then you rank and you produce according to ranking. So that's just it for that. Okay, so that is how to solve that problem. Now we want to go to the final exercise, which I will give it to you as an assignment. But if you look at it here, that's an assignment. There is no solution provided here. I want you to try your hands on that. Now we'll read this question. We will analyze it together. We'll analyze it together, and you go ahead and do the assignment for me. The company makes 4 products, W, X, Y, and Z. So it meets our criteria that we have multi-products. So we have choice. Using the same single item. So we are using the same. So limit the same factor of production is being used. And they told you that that same thing is direct material. So direct material here is our limiting factor. They have told you in this question that our limiting factor by implication, our limiting factor here is direct material. So this is the implication from this question. Now, budgeted data for the company is as follows. So look at the data here. This is the sales demand, as we usually do sales demand for WXYZ. Now look at the budgeted costs, direct material costs, labor costs, variable overhead, fixed overhead, blah, 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 blah. All right. So what happened here? All right. Okay, so how come I can't move? All right, so let's go now. Let's go down. As it's running faster. Okay, so let's go up again. I can move easily now. Now they said, due to restricted supply, only 78,000 naira of the material will be available. This is another way of telling you that the limiting factor is direct material. Now, it's not enough to know the limiting factor. It is also important to know how many of it is available. So these are the 2 things. Know your limiting factor, know how many is available. So So they've given us 78,000 naira, not units. So if you look at it here, it is material in naira, not material in volume. That is material in volume as in kilogram, as in units. But now they have told us that it is material in naira. So our limiting factor is not direct material unit, but direct material costs. So our limiting factor here is direct material costs. So I adjust it here now to direct material costs or spending or spending. So direct material costs, because they have told us the direct material is in naira. But if they told us direct material unit, then you would have done it in unit. So now look at what you're going to do now. The first thing to do in this question, because we are told to identify the quantities of production and sales of each product that will maximize annual profit. Now they said this question does not tell you the amount of material. It doesn't tell you the amount of material, but it does give you its value. So we are not told the quantity of material, but we are giving its value. So we are going to be using the usual method to find contribution. Okay, now look at what I want you to do. Step one, what is your contribution per unit? You were not given. Can you get it? Yes. How do you get it? Your contribution is going to be your sales price, which is given to you here, less your variable cost. And look at your variable cost. Direct material cost per unit 5 naira, direct labor cost 4 naira, variable overhead 1 naira. When you add all of this together, 5 plus 4 plus 1 will give you 10 naira. That means your variable cost is 10 naira. You less it from 50 naira, your contribution per unit is 40 naira. So you work out your contribution per unit first. So for W, you have done it as 40 naira. You can do that for X, Y, and Z. Follow the same pattern. That's the first step. Second step, what is your limiting factor? I've told you your limiting factor is direct material cost. How do I know? Because they gave you 78,000 naira. So it is in costs. If they have told you 78,000 units, we did, they told us 6,000 hours for direct labor. We know it's labor hours. If they have told us 6,000 naira for labor, we know it's labor cost. So in this case here, we are told 78,000 naira for direct material. So it's direct material cost. The limiting factor as direct material cost. What is the limiting factor per unit? Good thing, we have direct material cost here happens to be is what we have here, 5 naira. Sorry. Why is this thing highlighting? 5 naira. This 5 naira is your direct material cost. So that is the limiting factor. So this 5 naira, 4 naira, 8 naira, and 6 naira is your direct material cost per unit. That's your limiting factor. So what do you need to do is step 4. Step 4 is simply step 1 divided by step 3. So your contribution per limiting factor, contribution per limiting factor is going to be, for W, going to give you 50 naira, 50 naira divided by 5 naira. So yeah, 50 naira. No, it's not 50 naira, sorry. 40 naira. 40 naira was our contribution when we said 50 naira minus 10 gave us 40 naira. 40 naira per unit divided by direct material cost. Direct material cost, which is 5 naira. So we are going to get 40 divided by 5. What do we have here? 40 divided by 5. We have 8. So we have 8. So you come down here and you do your 8. So that is how you do for all others. You look for your contribution and you divide it by the limiting factor. So after doing all that, you will now rank. So you check which of them is higher, and you rank as 1, and you rank the all others. Then you now carry out your production plan, just as we did in exercise 3, and also what we did in exercise 2. So that's how you deal with limiting factor. So let me go over now to the summary so that we can use the summary as a way of analyzing what we've done. At the end of this topic, we were able to explain the issues of limiting factor. And we said that limiting factor will limit what we can produce. There are factors of production that are in scarce resource. In our exams, you'll be seeing material, you'll be seeing machine hours, you'll be seeing labor hours. These are the 3 classic things they can use in your exams. Material, either in volume or in amount, labor hours, machine hours. How do you identify your limiting factor? In the question, you may be told this is the limiting factor. Secondly, you may be told that all these products, because you're going to be giving more than 1 product, you might be giving 2, 3, or 4. All of them use the same particular factor of production. They tell it like that, means they are giving you a hint as to which of them is the limiting factor. So if they tell you just one of them, that all of them use the same amount of material, it points you that material is the limiting factor. If it tells you they use the same type of labor or machine, it means machine is the limiting factor. Sometimes they may use the same factors of production and which are more than 1. Maybe there are 2 or 3. And they gave you how many is available. But they didn't tell you which one of them is the limiting factor. You need to test it out. In example 1, we tested it out by looking at how many is required of us. All we need to do is we take our sales demand and divide it by the number of hours per unit to know how many hours, assuming that labor hours is our focus. You know how many hours we'll be spending for each product, and you add them up to get total hours required. Then you now look at total hours available. So when you check available and required, if the available is more than the required, you will have a surplus. But if the available is less than is required, you have a shortage. Whenever there is a shortage, there is a limiting factor. If there are more than one shortage, the one that has the highest shortage is the one that is the limiting factor. Then we have to carry out limiting factor analysis to formulate an optimal plan. And I gave you a 6-step process. First of all, you need to calculate your contribution per unit for each of these products. After getting your contribution per unit, identify the limiting factor. When you identify the limiting factor, you identify the limiting factor per unit. That's step 3, limiting factor per unit that is required. In step 4, you need to find out your contribution per limiting factor. So it's simply step 1, contribution per unit, divided by step 3, limiting factor per unit. Gives you contribution per limiting factor. That's what you get in step 4. In step 5, you are ranking. So the one with the highest contribution per limiting factor is ranked first, followed by the next higher one until you get to the list. Then you carry out your production plan based on ranking. And so you'll be moving from right to left, and from left to right rather, and you'll be mindful of how many of that limiting factor that you are consuming as you move from left to right. Then you find out that at a point in time, after satisfying all your demand, you may not be able to satisfy one at least. That is the essence of limiting factor. So you may need to scale that one down. And so you remember how we move from right to left. So in left to right, we are multiplying. From right to left, we'll be dividing by the limiting factor to get the quantity that will be produced that will match with what is available. So you do that and you limit it strictly. Sometimes your limiting factor will make it possible that one or more products may not be produced. And when that happens, that is still a limiting factor. And if you do it that way, the contribution you will get is the maximum contribution obtainable. No other thing will give you a bigger or maximum contribution. And that's what we've learned today. The limiting factor we've learned today. Thank you so much for coming to class, for learning this limiting factor. I want you to go through past question papers and see how you can solve some questions. Thank you so much. I will see you again in another class that we will have for management information. Thank you and good night. All right, so our time is up. So it's time to go. Once again, good night.